My name's Ben Grunow. I'm a photographer, obviously. And I'm going to talk, yeah, it is good to know. Are you a photographer?
Am I now?
No? You're going to be, right?
Maybe.
Okay. Well, so I'd like to see a show of hands of how many of you have tried to shoot photos at night. And I'd like to see some hands of who have not been successful. Cool. All right. All right. Well, obviously shooting at night, there's a lot of planning involved, and you really have to stress your camera out, and we're going to get into that here a little bit. I'll show you a couple images first. I personally like to try to see what my eyes saw. So basically, I'm not trying to stress the images so much in post, but sometimes there's a lot of different variables that you got to deal with when you're shooting at night to get the end result that you want. And the aurora is absolutely beautiful. I don't know if can I have a show of hands of people who have been to Iceland? Heck yeah! All right, that's what I'm talking about. And then you can also, when you do get into a little bit more technical, once you figure out how to find infinity on your camera, if you're having issues with that, then you can start focus stacking and adding a separate different foreground into this image, or into images. Like this image is it's stacked with focusing for the foreground of obviously these excavators, which I thought was completely different. I'm always trying to find something shoot something different, and I'm not trying to ever usually go to the iconic spot and recreate that image because I think it's a little bit stale, and I kind of want to shoot for me and shoot what makes me happy and shoot what I want to. This is a composite image, so this isn't even truly on the tripod in the Milky Way shot. It's actually, this is the largest cedar tree in the United States in California. And then I took a separate picture of the background and molded it together. Once you do start getting used to being able to shoot at night and being able to actually shoot in a high ISO and learn how to focus quickly, it's not gonna get boring, but you're gonna wanna be like, okay, how can I add more into the photo, This is just a single exposure. Lights obviously have a lot to do when you're shooting at night. Ambient light is huge. It almost looks like there's some sort of sunset going on in the background of this picture, but I live in Vermont. This is in Stowe, Vermont, and this is Mount Mansfield here, but this crazy bright light background, I'm not talking about this house or these cars that are driving in the middle. I'm talking about back here. That's Montreal 200 miles away. So Montreal 200 miles away, it being in exactly the back of my photo is making it look like it's sunset in the middle of night, which it's obviously not. It's just Montreal city lights. So if you're trying to get a really amazing Milky Way shot here in the city, good luck, go for it. You can totally shoot stars. It's a good place to start, but being where there's no ambient light from cities or houses or anything like that is where you're gonna actually really see your Milky Way pop out or see that many more stars. There's different websites to find out where is good for that or not, and so on and so forth. When you're shooting aurora, I'm just kind of roughly going over some settings until we actually get into the PowerPoint. But when you are shooting aurora, you're shooting a way, way quicker shutter speed than you would be for stars or Milky Way. When we're talking stars and Milky Way, we're talking 15 to 30 second exposures for the single exposure. There's this bulb thing that we all know about, and I'll get into it in a little bit actually before I explain it all now. There's stacking that you can do, which is instead of a bulb mode, you can take multiple pictures in a row, like you would a moving time lapse. You've got multiple pictures to play from. You can combine them in together afterwards to create the star trail effect that you see here, which you guys have all seen, I'm sure. And then you could also make it into a video, So I firmly believe that staying away from bulb is is a lot easier because it's very easy to mess up a 10-minute exposure, and there you've wasted 10 minutes, and you got to try again for another 10-minute exposure. So why would we do that? I do understand that traditionally it's great to not have a composite image and take one separate exposure, but I personally like to see the foreground, see everything else. And then, you can get super crazy when you get involved into it with focus stacking, which we'll get into in a little bit. I just want to show you guys a couple images. Some of these images, like this image I created maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Nowadays, I would do it completely different. But the only way that you could see basically this train bridge in focus and the Milky Way in focus is by taking 2 separate images on a tripod and then combining them together certain different ways. There's multiple different ways to do that. Same thing here, this I shot a long time ago, but you can see some movement in the water. I had my flashlight out on a separate exposure for the foreground and then took a separate exposure for the background. And I'm going to keep saying the same things over so that I get it into your head a little bit. And if you guys do want notes on this, I've got like a cheat sheet of notes it's a 1-page PDF. I didn't get them printed out, but if you want to shoot me an email or write me on Instagram with your email, I can send it to you. My email is ben@elmoremountainphoto.com, or I'm on Instagram as Ben Grunow, BenGrunow. Easiest way is just shoot me your email address and I'll shoot you the PDF, and it's a nice quick little cheat sheet on if you forget everything that we talk about or if you fall asleep, which, I don't blame you. It happens. And then you can also start stretching your pictures. You can, if you're into panoramic, you can create the whole scene. This is in Switzerland. I was born over there. This is the Eiger. This light here is actually a train station in the middle of the Eiger that goes up to the highest point in Europe. There's the observatory up here. Lights are off at the moment when I shot this photo. This I shot many years ago. I think it was on the GH2, which, is a very older camera from Panasonic. And a lot of people are like, so I shoot a Micro Four Thirds camera, right? Raise of hands, who knows what Micro Four Thirds is? Who shoots Micro Four Thirds? Why? Video camera, okay. So this being the GH2, yes, there's some noise involved and stuff like that. But when we're talking GH4, GH5, G9 cameras, there is no more noise. There's no reason to have a full frame camera unless you're printing 12 feet and want to look at it this close. It's just not needed. Or if you do like to, if you want to work out, it's good to carry heavy lenses around, I get that, if you know what I'm saying. Star trails, again, stacking photos on top of each other, involving people. You can involve product shots. It's when you start to shoot at night, it's like, I always started seeing these star pictures, and I'm like, how can I create that, or how can I make that different? And then I'm like, you could do product photos. You can do the sky. There's so many things once you figure out just a little bit of annoying curve to find infinity all the time, and then be able to not move the camera and switch your settings. You can create unbelievable images, and it might not be what your eye saw, but it is actually a photo of traditionally of the camera not moving. It's not a composite, and it's there, it's real. Fireflies, multiple exposures stacked on top of each other. Again, Montreal, lighting up the background. Being able to focus your foreground and your background. All this crazy color in here is air glow. I mean, reflections and so, where do you start? Right? You have a camera, where do you start? What do? You obviously need a sturdy tripod. You can try to go out and shoot with some sort of $100 tripod if you want, but like absolutely the vibration of any sort of wind, of you pressing the trigger, obviously you want to put a trigger delay on, but a sturdy tripod is super important because any bit of wind blowing, that picture or your camera moving when you're taking a 30-second exposure, it's gonna mess it up. It's not gonna look super clean like you want it. You want a tack sharp image focused perfectly for infinity. You guys all know what infinity is? Yeah? Anybody not know what infinity is?
How do you find it on your camera?
Every camera is different. That's the thing. I mean, there's the infinity sign on your lens, but infinity is basically the infinite plane that's back there that you're focusing for, which is what's furthest away.
So are some cameras it's difficult to find that spot?
Some lenses, well now there's electronic lenses, there's non-electronic lenses. Some cameras you turn them on and you're right at infinity. Like in my Panasonic camera, when I turn my camera on, it's automatically, if it's automatically goes to infinity. So I don't have to touch anything. Some cameras, like if they're not motorized or, you put it on infinity, you test it on infinity. If it's not infinity, you find it and you mark it with gaffing tape, basically. That's the easiest way to do it. And hopefully when you do go back, that is correct. But having a backpack for all your gear. If you're going to shoot night photos, we're not shooting in the daytime. And if you hopefully are not in the city to actually get real clear colors of Milky Ways, you need a backpack, you need a flashlight for all your gear, you need a camera that you can actually manipulate ISO. It's no full-on app like point and shoot like only has IA. You need some manual settings. You need to control the ISO, you need to control the shutter speed, you need to control your focus. You do need a shutter delay. Some cameras don't have a shutter delay. My camera's got it all built in. I can set it for a 2-second delay, 10-second delay, and then shoot away. If most times you might want to shoot more than 30 seconds, and there's ways around that too with triggers and so on and so forth. The faster the lens, the better. Technology's come so far, but a few years ago, a 2.8 was really fast at something super wide. Obviously, there's a lot more that's a lot wider and available now. But the faster the lens, the shorter amount of exposure you need. So you're not going to be waiting around a lot longer. And we're talking less noise as well. I mean, when we're talking 15 to 30-second exposures, regardless of the camera, you still have to think about noise no matter what your settings are. If you don't have an intervalometer or something that can, who knows what raise your hand if you don't know what an intervalometer is. Okay, cool. An intervalometer is something that basically tells your camera, okay, I'm taking a 20-second exposure right now, and at 25 seconds, I want you to take another picture, and I want you to keep doing it for 1,000 times. So 20 seconds is my exposure that I've found that I need to take. And so this is going to actually make me be able to shoot a time lapse of it if your camera doesn't have it in itself. My Panasonic Lumix, all our camera systems literally have intervalometers built into all of it, focus stacking, the whole nine. Hopefully everybody will get on the same page and offer that as well. But if you don't, you can buy a separate plug-in that you plug in, and it will you basically figure out, okay, I'm taking a 20-second exposure. I'm going to tell this little box here to shoot the photo at 25 seconds. And why I'm saying 25 seconds and not 20 seconds is because your camera does need to read and write the picture. And if you do say, okay, yeah, take it every 21 seconds, your camera's going to start to get confused, especially if you got something plugged into it and it's telling it to take a picture so often and your camera's trying to write it to the memory card, or you writing it to 2 memory cards. So whenever you do go to set your intervalometer, make sure you do set it to a couple seconds after your max exposure time, if that makes sense. Having an idea of, a lot of the times now that I go out, it's like I see some place during the day, and I'm like, oh well, like where's the Milky Way going to be, at a certain point, or where's the North Star going to be to make a star trail around the North Star. So, like actually knowing where the Milky Way comes up and down and where the North Star that's pretty simple. It's north, and you just look up, and that's everything revolves around that. Especially up here in the northern hemisphere, a little bit different down south, but there's also apps that can help you. Stellarium is free. There's tons of cheaper, free apps on your phone, on any platform you can download that will, it's augmented reality. You put it up to the sky. You see like a truck or something. You're like, I want that to be my foreground. I wonder if through this little spot here, what the stars are going to be like at what time. The best app there really is PhotoPills. It's a paid app. It's like $20, but it's completely worth it. You can pinpoint anywhere in the earth, and you can fast forward time, and you're sitting on your phone, you're fast forwarding time, and you're like, oh, okay, so if I came back here on August whatever, it's the Milky Way is going to be in this position right where I've got this gap, and I know that there's like not as much light pollution here, so I'll come back on this date and try to get this shot that I was thinking would be cool in my mind, and go like that. Take 3 flashlights. I made this PowerPoint a while ago. Two flashlights isn't enough because it can go wrong. But I'm talking, I hike and travel, and I'm trying to stay in my tent for a while and make dinner with my flashlight as well. But you're at night, you're out there, you've got a backpack on, you probably can't see anything. Bring at least 2 flashlights, and it's going to help you find infinity too if you can't find infinity, which we're going to get into. And then also, you could even get fancy flashlights that are light temperatured, because when we talk a little bit about focus stacking, which is illuminating a foreground with a temperatured flashlight, sometimes if you have a super warm, crappy flashlight, it's going to be a super warm foreground that you're going to have to adjust, and it won't be really the actual color that it is. So keep that into consideration, and always have a backup no matter what. I always carry 3 in batteries now. So this was just a single exposure, and you can tell that with the light, I could have taken a separate exposure and lit up the foreground. You would have seen more grass. You would have actually seen me holding the flashlight up. But this photo is, I think, a 15-second exposure at ISO 800, and I just had the flashlight and was holding it up still, and because I wanted to see how much light that would actually show with me not even flashing the flashlight towards the camera. And again, like we've talked about it, location and timing is very, very, very essential. Light pollution. How do you know where there's light pollution? There's also websites for that. Dark Site Finder I find to be the best website. It's free, it's online. You just click on it. All it is a map of the world. You type in where you're going, or you type in where you want to go, and you can find out if it's dark there, or you can just type in your own house and start moving away to find out where it's actually dark. So we'll do Stellarium first, which is a free download. And again, this is all for planning. This isn't for dark skies. But so here's our night sky. You can back out so you can see everything that's going on too. But you got your whole horizon line here. And again, download this for free. I can say, okay, where on the earth do I want to be? I'm going to Switzerland in the end of August. So let's just check Switzerland out. Okay, I guess it found it for me. So I can fast forward time, or I can pick when I want to go. But basically, there's a little timer down here that says the date today. And I can see where the Milky Way is rising in the south or not. Is the moon out? We've got no moon. I mean, and again, this is just a simple, super way for you guys to start to get an idea of, will the moon be out? Won't it be out? You can also just check the moon cycle on Google. What's up? Yep. This is the stock horizon picture, you know.
There's a site called Peak Finder that you'll actually see the view of what.
Well, that's why I'm saying photo pills. There's nothing better than photo pills yet. If there is, correct me. But you know, I mean, you can say I'm down in this valley, and it knows the rise of the mountain over there. So it, you know, photo pills is the ultimate. But here, this is a free one. You don't have to pay for it, and you know, you can fast forward however many days you want. PILLS. And again, everything we talk about, if you guys do, email me or write me a message. I'll just send you the notes, and it's kind of a cheat sheet with all this different stuff on it. So let's get out of here. And then again, if you don't want to do this on your computer, there's a million apps for it too. I'm not, Stellarium might have a phone app now, but I'm not sure. But again, photo pills is the best. So this is the Dark Site Finder website. And we go to the light pollution map, and here we have the world. So let's go over to New York. There we go. New York's looking pretty bright. I think that looks like the do not shoot zone for me. So where do we get north here? Okay, so you know, up here in the Catskills, we got some action as far as it being fully dark. But you know, again, this is a good way to be like, okay, if you're going overseas or you're going somewhere kind of remote, you can be like, okay, is there actually ambient light there or not? As we get out west, obviously we've got less and less cities, but city pollution plays such a role in your overall image, the warmth of the picture, the actual color that it really is. And the less light pollution you have, the less correcting you have to do afterwards. So. And also, the more stars you get to see, it's, you know, it's if you're in a true dark spot, it's that those are the stars. Oh, I've never seen the stars like this. You know, I mean, everybody has said that, right? Processing software, always getting it in the camera first, right, is the most important with your white balance and everything as far as. When you go to shoot at night and you're not familiar with it, you're going to want to play around, and what it looks like on the camera is going to be a lot different than when you bring it into your computer because your eyes are seeing at night. You've got flashlights going on. You know, when you look in your viewfinder, it's going to look awesome and cool, and you're like, yes, and then you'll bring it back to your computer, and you'll be like, well, I should have shot a longer exposure. I should have shot it brighter. I should have shot it darker. So there's going to be a learning curve no matter what when this happens. But editing the images, obviously, Photoshop is my go-to. A lot of people are Lightroom people. DxO is a good way to reduce noise or to shoot out a PNG image. StarStax is a good free program that if you do want to make the star trail thing, and you've used an intervalometer and made all these pictures that you've got 500 pictures, you don't know what to do with it, and they're all single pictures of the stars, and you want to make this star trail, you can download StarStax if you don't have Photoshop. If you have Photoshop, it's super easy. It's a learning curve, but it's pretty simple once you know how to do it. YouTube video, we don't need to go too crazy in depth for that. After Effects as well will make a video for you.
What is After Effects?
After Effects is basically a program mostly made for like graphics of movement, and I mean it does a bunch of different things, but that's how I usually put my time lapse together, and then or I use Premiere, but when I want to actually do it real quick and I slap it right in there.
Can you still do this stuff with CS6, or do you need the CC subscription?
You can definitely still do it with the CS6 or older. Yep, it's a stack mode that you use. It's called Maximum. This is my barn. My cow's pregnant. I'm pretty excited. I've got a farm. I built my own house, and my mom wanted a picture of the barn. with the stars, so I got it for her. And the reason that you see the barn actually looking like it's daylight, it's not daylight, it's dark, but I took a separate exposure for that with my flashlight, lit it up with a different settings, and then set it for the background, and let my camera do its thing on its intervalometer, taking multiple pictures. So I say this is 200 plus images is because it's 200 plus images in the background, one picture for the foreground, and I actually did a separate picture just to get the light inside the barn. Which I combined separately, and I did that all in Photoshop. But again, getting it correct, perfectly correct inside my camera first is most important. And high ISO. High ISO makes noise no matter what. If you're shooting in any sort of low light situation, you want to use high ISO, regardless if you're shooting night photography. The higher ISO, the more noisy you are, the quicker the exposure is. So I generally start around 800 to 1600 if I'm shooting the stars or Milky Way. If I'm shooting aurora and brighter lights that are in the sky, stars are not as bright as the aurora, I tend to go down a little bit from that as just a starting point.
Well, what lens is it?
Every lens is different.
Yeah, I know, but you're shooting like a 1.4.
I'm usually shooting a 2.8 that's wide. It depends. It depends on what the scene is. It always, that's a crazy variable, but the wider, the quicker exposure you get. And also, if you do, when you first start out, I'm saying starting at 800 and 1600 is a good idea for your final, like the final image that you want to create. But to actually frame out your shot, bump your ISO up to some crazy number. It's going to be a throwaway picture, but it's only going to be like a super quick exposure. So you're not wasting time taking 30-second exposures to get it right, get your focus right. Crank the ISO up super high, which means we get a much quicker picture, which means we're not wasting our time out in the cold and in the dark. Does that make sense? So again, I'll start at higher than 6400 nowadays and get a picture off real quick, see if everything in the frame that I can't see at night, even with my flashlight, is where I want it to be and what I want it to be. Do you shoot JPEG or RAW? I always shoot both. But when I'm shooting a super long time lapse, I'll only shoot RAW, and then I'll correct white balance after. I usually like to shoot auto white balance, especially if I'm in a super dark place, or even if it depends. If there's a lot of ambient light, I might play with the Kelvin line, which, we don't need to go into Kelvin, but it's basically, if you know about Kelvin, it's white balance and setting your own auto white balance, or you can make your own white balance.
If we did go into Kelvin,
3600 to 42 is where I'd start for stars, and maybe drop down a little bit for aurora. But it depends on what color the aurora is again. And long shutter noise reduction. Some cameras have that nowadays. It's helpful for a single exposed shot. What long shutter noise reduction does is you take a 30-second exposure, it's going to take a black 30-second exposure, and it's going to get rid of your hot pixels. It's going to get rid of anything that actually wasn't in the scene that's not supposed to be there. But I don't shoot that way because I'm always shooting time lapses. I'm always trying to, shoot multiple pictures because sometimes there's a satellite going through the picture. Sometimes a meteor comes through, and that's actually the image I want, Or I want to make the star trail. So I wait till I look through all these pictures if I'm going to use it for a single image. And if I had said, okay, let's turn long shutter noise reduction to get a better, crisper image and shoot a time lapse. My exposure is 30 seconds, so then I need to wait 30 seconds for it to take a black shot. So now we're talking a minute. So now a minute's elapsed, and I still got to say, camera, hang out for 2 seconds and read and write this picture. So we're talking 62 seconds. So if I was trying to create this star trail or this time lapse, there's going to start to be a gap in between the stars themselves, so take star trail off the whole map there.
But you're only doing that if you're taking one shot.
Correct, yep. But it does help if you're just taking one shot, you know?
Whether it's 15, 30 seconds.
Correct, exactly. Camera mode, just if you're like, oh, I don't shoot manual, you know, doesn't matter. Just put it on manual, set, you know, make sure you have no auto ISO on, start at 1600, you know, and this is for your final shot, you know, what you want to get for your final shot. Crank it up once you get familiar with it to see the scene at night. Set your maximum aperture because that's going to obviously give you the quickest exposure. And we're trying to stay away from longer exposures because if it's too long of exposure, we're going to start to see the star move. And we only want to do that afterwards and put them on top of each other. Otherwise, I mean, if that's the effect you're going for, that's fine, and that's cool too. But again, if you have per lens of what your field of view is, there's a rule to find out. It's called the 500th rule to figure out, like, if I'm taking too long of an exposure, then it's going to start to make a star trail. And if I'm taking too short of an exposure, it's just not going to work. Turn your image stabilization off. We're shooting on a sturdy tripod, right? So image stabilization probably is not going to help us at all. It might actually work against us. And then, you know, if your camera doesn't have a built-in shutter release or timer delay, or if it's not Wi-Fi-able to your phone like mine is, and I can just send every picture to my phone in 5 seconds, it's so cool. But you can buy a $15, $20 remote, plug it in, and, you know, press the button so the vibration is not actually shaking the camera and messing up your image. This is a really bad picture, but it means a lot to me because it opened my eyes up to being able to shoot at night. And, you know, I live in Vermont, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna try to find a spot with the river where the Milky Way is exactly in the background. You know, totally for me, it was super cool to be able to, like, okay, it's my friend's house. I'm gonna, you know, I know that the Milky Way is gonna be there through my app, right through these trees. And then I'll light up the foreground. I'm going to create this, like, stacked image. So this to me was like a wow, an eye opener. Like, there's so many different things I could shoot at night and shine my light on, and it's gonna look super different, super cool. And then so you have to figure out, you know, where do you start on how many seconds you're going to shoot, right? So there is this thing called the 500 rule. So, and we're talking 35 millimeter equivalent here the 500 rule works with. So I shoot Lumix. Our cameras are micro four thirds, so a 50 millimeter is a 100 millimeter. You know, no matter what kind of camera, if you convert to what 35 mil is, like for example, you take 24, or it's really take 500 divided by 24, you get 21 seconds. This is wrong. And then so that being said, it's like a 24 millimeter field of view. So if I take a 30-second exposure, the dots are going to start to be long dots, if that makes sense. You know, they're going to start to become a star trail. So for the 24 mil lens, like 21 seconds is maybe I've got a little bit of room of play there if I want to play around with noise or whatnot. So 20 to 22 seconds is a good number, you know, to shoot on that 24 millimeter field of view. Focusing at night. How do you find infinity? Again, all cameras should have this thing called focus peaking. Raise your hand if you don't know what focus peaking is. Focus peaking is the coolest thing ever. It's an illuminated light at night, in the day, doesn't matter. So if I'm shooting, doesn't matter what my aperture is, as long as I'm moving the slider and focusing, whatever I want to focus on, I can pick the color of light. It starts illuminating and bouncing back and forth and so on and so forth, so you know what field of view your focal plane is on. And at night, that's super, super convenient because If I can't find infinity, I'm looking at my camera screen and I'm just moving it a little tiny bit, and boom, the star, I use the color blue, and you can customize your settings or whatever. I use blue, and sure enough, I move a tiny bit more, and all the stars that I can see. Well, I also have constant preview in my camera. Constant preview is you get what you see. So in the camera, it's showing me the picture I'm going to get before I take it, and I can focus. I'm seeing these crazy colors in the picture, which is not going to be in the picture, but it's actually my focal plane. So that being said, that's what focus peaking is, and super simple, easy way for finding infinity.
I don't understand that at all. So what, is it a feature in the camera?
Yes. Yep.
So if your camera doesn't have that feature,
Then I'm going to tell you how to do it right now, if you don't have that, which is a lot harder. So I was talking about those extra flashlights and so on and so forth. So if your camera gives you trouble finding infinity, if your lens gives you trouble finding infinity when you're not familiar with infinity and how to get there on that lens, you can take a flashlight, run 100 feet out into the woods, shine the flashlight at you, take your live view on whatever camera you have, zoom in as far as you can, and focus on that flashlight. When that flashlight looks as good as it can, take a picture, check it, zoom in again, same deal. Do you have a question? No. And then if that's a problem too, then you basically have to mark it, know your camera, know your lens, mark it during the day, like I'm saying with gaff tape, put a little line, and find that place again, Because if you're not infinity focused, like to the exact T, like little tiny bit of hairline movement, it's gonna look out of focus. The stars are gonna be bigger, the stars are gonna look weird, You're gonna be like, oh, well, let's try this again. So focusing for infinity was my biggest learning curve in getting into night photography. So, and again, sometimes I'll think I'll have it right, and I'll take a picture, and I'll go home, and I'll be like, man, like. But again, now that I've got constant preview and focus peaking and focusing at night in my camera, I don't have any of these issues. So whatever camera you're using has a lot to do with it too. This is a handheld shot of the moon. Finding infinity, we just talked about that. Focus peaking we just talked all about this, but if you guys want to take a picture of it or look at it. Again, all these notes I have in one PDF. If you write me a message, shoot me an email, I'll just shoot you the PDF. And if you have any questions too, let me know in the future. I'm totally always willing to answer any sort of questions or help out in any sort of way I can. This is what I'm talking about with being just a hairline off of focus. Doesn't look focused. I missed a really cool opportunity at these were light pillars. It was so cold out. It was like minus 20 out. Hadn't really hit winter yet, and I didn't get the shots because I thought I was in focus, but I wasn't at infinity. And it was literally just a little tiny bit.
You can get a deconvolution software. That's what they use to fix the initial photos.
I want to get it right in the camera, always, Dude, getting it right in the camera is way less work afterwards, always,
But it works great on stars because they're points of light, and you just need to calculate the blur, and it'll.
Cool. I'm not sure. I want to get it right in the camera.
I'm sorry, so I'm trying to understand. So you're focusing during the day?
No.
Daylight?
No. Focusing at night. You could also take your camera if there's a street light. If we do have this light pollution around, take something that's a couple hundred yards away. Put your live view on the back of your camera and zoom. You can zoom into live view in almost all cameras, and then you focus on that, and then take a picture, and then look at it. Zoom back into the picture you just took. Check out how it is, and make sure it's in focus, and then you've found infinity. So if your lens is electronic, I can't know every single lens, and every lens is different. I just know that my system the system I use is a lot easier nowadays than, I used to struggle all the time. I had like gaff tape on all my lenses, and then it would move on me, and I'd be like, oh, this is just ridiculous, like I'm getting gummy tape on all my lenses. And then you can shoot panos. These are all older images. All this green stuff is from air glow, which is light pollution bouncing off and moving around. And then once you've started taking some images and you're like, okay, like I've shot the Milky Way 1,000,000 times now, or I've shot this star trail so many times, and everything is black in the foreground, and I'm just focusing on the sky, and I want to, maybe be a little bit more creative or make it a little bit more exciting. You can start using your flashlight to focus stack, which, for focus stacking, we've got these settings that we've been talking about for, the sky, the Milky Way, the background, the stars, how to get infinity. Now we're talking something that's in our foreground. So we got to change our focus while we're on our tripod, barely able to move our camera at all, because if we bounce the camera at all, it's not going to line up on top of the plane at all. So then when we go afterwards to combine this picture, it's just not going to work out, I mean, you can make it work out again, however you want to make it work out, but it's easier always to get it right first off the bat. So that being said, this picture, if I were to redo this again, I might focus to actually get some of this train track parts in focus, and I'd maybe make it darker. This is an older image. So like I focused in the beginning for this foreground here. I focused for the tracks real close. Not real close, but kind of in the middle of the plane. I did a separate exposure for the train bridge itself. And then I went back afterwards, focused for my infinity because it was easy for me to focus on infinity, and shot that. But I also cranked my ISO way further down, and I set the exposure to be a lot longer. And instead of shooting at 2.8, I shot at f7. So I was talking maybe a 5-minute exposure. And then you can start moving around your camera, obviously not in front of your camera, and like using your light as a paintbrush. It's really cool. So, I mean, and then you can be weird. You can light it from this side and you can light it from that side. And I've had people say, well, that's not natural. Well, I mean, none of this stuff is natural at night that we're doing right now. We're kind of manipulating what we see or what's actually there to be seen by our eyes. But we still can't see it. We can see with the flashlight. You can shine the flashlight on it, know what it looks like, know what the stars look like, and that's, in your head what you want to achieve. That being said, I've got all these three different images that, how the heck do I get them into one? Or, that's where the learning curve comes into Photoshop or different programs, and being able to layer them on top of each other and get your end result is, a 4-hour conversation. So, here's just an old bus. This was 3 separate exposures, and. How much time do I have, by the way? Cool. So I if I were to shoot with let's forget the Milky Way. If I was just wanted to get a picture of this bus at night, so what I did to get this picture of this bus, which is actually, I didn't move my tripod at all. I changed all my settings. I put my camera here, shot the bus. I came over to this side, used my flashlight, and I lit up this side, right? But how the heck, did the flashlight go in through the windows, or like how's the inside lit up, I was like, okay, well maybe I'll try another exposure and run around the bus and shine the light inside the bus, It's just, there's so many different ways you can illuminate stuff, make it look different, accentuate where you want your eye to see, where your eye is going to bring in the photo. Do you want it to be in one spot? Do you want it to be everywhere? And that's why night photography is like really fun and exciting for me, because I can totally be in complete control of this paintbrush that's a flashlight. It's just a really cool concept for me.
You use just a white light?
I've got a couple different. It depends on lumens. You can get different temperature lumens, and those all affect, your different environments or how you want to light it up and so on and so forth. You can use a flash too. You can use anything, It's just exciting and different and eye-opening, and I think it opened my photography up to a whole nother world for me. And then, so this whole focus stacking thing that I've been talking about, which, may not make sense to you guys yet, but so when I'm saying I'm taking two separate pictures to get the foreground and the background, basically I'm going to be changing my ISO, stopping down my aperture, and giving a longer exposure while I'm painting this in. Because if it was the same settings for the background, we'd just be blowing it out really quick, really easily, at ISO 1600 at 2.8, and any little bit of light, it's just going to blown. I'm a firm believer I shoot underexposed and pull the light out. And I mean, obviously getting it right the first time is the most important. So here's the Milky Way situation. Obviously, you can see that this is a 4-minute exposure, so you're starting to see the star trail. But I want everybody to see the foreground, but I don't want this star trail. I want a tack sharp image of the Milky Way in the background. So I did the foreground here. I shot at ISO 100 for 4 minutes, and I focused on my foreground, which all I did was take my flashlight out. I mean, I used focus peaking, but you can live view and zoom in and take your flashlight and focus for what's in front of you or what you want to be seen. And then, well, you got 4 minutes to run around with your flashlight and paint in light wherever you want. If you mess up, guess what? You take another picture and paint in a different area, whatever you want to do. It's fun. And then you can do a separate exposure for the background. ISO 3200, 30 seconds, Definitely can't see the foreground. So this is when you get bored of this, you can start to light up your foreground, and it's just a whole nother way to create. And then boom, you combine them together, voila. I think it's a whole lot cooler of an image. And again, white balance, so I had to correct that all after because of the temperature of my flashlight, which messed up the temperature of the real actual background of the Milky Way, so on and so forth. That's how much ambient light plays into play, is just my flashlight messed up the entire background. So can you imagine shooting in the city, there's a lot more than one flashlight going on, and then there's this type of image. So, as far as focus stacking goes, I think I focused maybe 8 different points in this image, and I focused separately here, focus separately here, focus separately here, focus separately here. Obviously, complete different settings for the Milky Way itself. And then as I was focus stacking, obviously, when I focus stacked from here, I shined the light from the right side. And when I focus stacked from over here, I shine the light from that side. And then again, some were throwaway images, some were keep images. Do I add this one into the focus or not, And then when I was going through it, I came out here in the middle of the night and just got lucky, found a perfect yellow lobster pot while I was camping in Maine going to shoot night photos. Perfect, And when I was shooting, I was looking at the photos I'd taken. I still hadn't moved my tripod, and I noticed that, in here, I was almost bokehing my foreground into there, and then, everything was tack sharp in the background. It just kind of looked weird, so I did a separate focus point for here, separate focus point for there, and then hand blended them all together in Photoshop, which is, a long talk, but.
And you're just moving your focus point.
On my camera, I'm on constant. I shoot a Lumix G9. Everything's constant preview. So everything that I shoot, I already know what it's going to look like before I shoot it, because the camera is just opening its electronic shutter open. gathering the information that I've told it to shoot, and I haven't even shot it, and it's showing me the picture of it, you know?
Yeah, so you're just moving your focus.
And then I'm just touching, yeah, literally just, I'll focus there. And then on my phone, I can be like, oh, I'll change the settings like that so I'm not messing up with the camera. And then, you know, by the way, I've taken all my pictures, boom, boom, Wi-Fi on my phone, and I'm done, you know?
So you're controlling your camera.
Yeah, I mean, back when I learned how to do this, I wasn't, you know? And I know all you guys don't have the cameras that can do it. Lumix cameras. What's that?
To shoot the stars, the minimum speed that you can get the movie.
Minimum speed, it depends on what lens you're using. Always depends on what lens you're using. Depends how fast your lens is. Everyone is different. Every single, that's that 500 rule we're talking about.
There isn't any, you say maybe in a minute you're going to get the track, the star.
Yeah. So that 500 rule, you take the 35 millimeter equipment, divide by 500, and there you go. And that will give you like where it should be, the amount of seconds it should be without going, you know, if you can do more than that, be careful, and you do less than that, be careful. You know, again, I wanted to show the foreground. The foreground was so cool. And then, you know, where do I start when I post-process? You know, I teach these workshops, and I feel like I could talk for like 6 hours every time, and I never get to the end. But yeah, the first thing I correct is the white balance and the temperature. Again, trying to get it perfect in the camera is always key. Saturation, you can boost a little bit if you feel like you need more color involved, because we're shooting black sky at night. It's all black. So boosting saturation isn't going to kill everything, but obviously we don't want to make the thing look too crazy. Playing with your brightness and contrast sliders are a good place to start, just to boost, showing, you know, boost the little tiny specks of stars to be brighter. You can use noise reduction, you can sharpen. When you get real crazy and you know how to blend, you can start playing with luminosity masks, which is amazing stuff, but a long also learning curve. And that can get technical quick, but it's super helpful, and all the information is on YouTube for all this stuff. And then, so I was talking about, I kind of, you know, was like, oh, bulb is stupid in the beginning, and I told you why, and this is kind of this is why it's not stupid, it's why I don't shoot bulb. You know, we're talking 10 to 30 minute exposures, and you're only gonna get one final result, and in 10 to 30 minutes, I could shoot, you know, a couple hundred photos and have a time lapse, a star trail, and a single image, and you know, maybe there's something cool that flew through in there. So to me, that's why I do it. And if you are trying to do it, there's a formula to figure it out. It's way more variables that you're gonna have to deal with to actually get the end result. And you know, some stuff's always gonna be blown out or not blown out. This is a single 10-minute bulb exposure while I was like waiting for the aurora to get exciting. It did get a little bit exciting while I was taking the picture, which just blew out everything behind this covered bridge, but that's okay. I mean, this one worked out, and I've shot a bunch of them, and this is the one that I got that I like. But again, so if you guys want to play with that, around with that, it's you can get super cool images, but I always say stack, because you got so much, it's future-proofing all your stuff. Because you can make the same star trail of the same bulb exposure with what you got. And then image stacking to create the star trails. Same, you know, it's the same thing we're talking about. It's the same thing I've been saying, is you can use it for a time lapse, you can use it to make a star trail, you can use separate images. So this is 100 images of me just telling the camera, take a 15-second exposure, take this 15-second exposure every 17 seconds so that the camera has at least 2 seconds to do what it needs to do. I'm sure the camera can do it fast, but we've got a 5-second rule in between, basically, before it's going to start being too far, where it's going to leave little tiny lines in between when we combine it all on top. Why would it leave lines? Because we're gapping the time. We're not recording the time of the star being there. Super simple. So this was 160. Put them all in Photoshop together. Pressed combine, basically. Make a stack mode. Send it to maximum. Voila. Here's an example of where that 5 seconds was maybe 10 seconds. And you can see the little bit of lines in between, you know? Throw it out. And then Star Stacks is a free one that will take all those ones you have and put them on top of each other. Image stacker, deep sky stacker. I use Photoshop. It's just how I've learned. Now it's all in the camera too, but. And then, so this is just a different way of, I stacked all these pictures. I wanted to still see the Milky Way. I wanted to see star trails. And I wanted to focus stack the tree, So I slapped an opacity over the star trail that I'd created of a single image from this same tripoded spot. And then light painted in as well. And it just it was just something different, The aurora, when you go to shoot the aurora, we're talking more of like a lot. You've got a lot quicker exposures that you can play with. You're not talking as much time because most of the time, when you're in Iceland or Alaska or Australia or somewhere where you're that close to the pole and the aurora is that crazy, it's going to be so bright when you have a good event that it's way brighter than the stars are. No matter what, so we're talking all these settings can be, this time at least can be from 30 second, we're talking 5-second exposures, 3-second exposures. And again, yeah, you do want to be on a tripod, but nowadays I can totally crank my ISO up, shoot 5-axis stabilization if I turn that back on for night and handheld 1-second exposures and less and still get really cool images. Anyways, I'm going to wrap it up because I think I'd have to. Thank you guys very much for your time. I hope you learned something.